Oh, hi there. Tonight I wanted to talk about John McCain and his passing. I have a great deal of respect for the man. He died of a brain tumor at age 81. But there are things about him. Um, okay, let's start by just saying there's alternate facts. They're not lies. They're just, there are reasons for them. Uh, okay. So he went to the Hanoi uh, detention center, whatever you want to call it, basically where he was tortured for many years um, during the Vietnam War. Um, he got preferential treatment because his father was an admiral that they found out. But when I say preferential treatment, um, that means that the North Vietnamese weren't going to, like kill you exactly. It doesn't mean he got anything as far as perks go. That's certainly not the case. But it did buy a ticket for freedom. There are many men who went to that POW camp and never came out. John McCain, he obviously wouldn't have known at the time. Um, and, this isn't a common way of thinking for most people, and, that's probably a good thing. Um, there is a confession video or audio, really, on YouTube of him saying he was given good medical care by professional doctors and things like that. And it was meant for the North Vietnamese propaganda campaign. Um, he didn't say too much in it. The thing is, there's probably days, if not weeks, of video footage of him communicating, answering questions for the propaganda unit and things like that in North Vietnam. And none of that will ever be released to the public. So if people believe that the story is just he made a little confession, they recorded it, and that was it, it's not entirely true. Um, in this regard, I think of North Korea. There was a documentary called Crossing the Line where there were some Americans who did cross into no, North Korea, and a very small number of them were actually, there for, North Korea's version of Hollywood, really. They were in actual movies and things like that. That was not the case for the propaganda unit in North Vietnam. They were downright savage, and it was a very atrocious place to have gone to. It was more like a horror movie that was real. So John McCain, obviously, not wanting to die a horrible death. Um, Mind you, it's a completely different system over there. I don't know how well he know how to speak Vietnamese. Not that it would sound coherent even if he did, because as a military institution, PW camp, they wouldn't be talking properly anyway. So that you couldn't figure out what it is they meant or whatever, and they'd have codes on how they talked and similar sort of stuff like that, and it would be scary. And a lot of the times he was in solitary confinement, and although getting beaten up is horrible, I believe that his legs were broken, or was it one leg and two arms? Well, I think it was one leg, and then the other arm was broken, and then they broke the other one when he uh, bailed on his aircraft when it was hit by a missile. But there are other things they can do to torture you too. that really play on the mind, because it's, like, obviously it hurts a lot if someone bashes your arm in with a rifle butt. That's a critical injury. But the thing about that is you're not gonna feel like you're gonna die under normal circumstances. Obviously, in a POW camp, you don't know that. But what I'm getting at is there are other situations and other things they could do to you. Um, like maybe him seeing, them uh, kill other American soldiers that were were in the camp in all kinds of horrible ways. And all this was video recorded. North Vietnam was a very poor country, so they didn't, have their version of Hollywood, obviously. Um, but simple cameras that uh, is in the War Museum for the North Vietnamese, as far as boosting their morale within their military. And the thing about it is, it's important because the Vietnam War didn't end. That's a misconception a lot of people have. Not only are there people in North Vietnam who despise Americans, there are Americans who despise the North Vietnamese, the NVA, and even some of the South Vietnamese. I mean, they're not all bad people, of course, but there still are assholes lurking around in Vietnam. There's no getting around that. Anyone who tries to refute that statement has got to be a retard or something. Another thing, form of torture, like, I'm not saying it's going to be like medieval. No, it basically was like medieval stuff, but they were probably more thinking along the lines of new poisons. There's all kinds of poisonous things in Vietnam, particularly scorpions and spiders and snakes, but a lot of poisonous plants, things like that. And they may have even given them, well, I'd have to fact check that one because, I only did a few minutes worth of research, and, obviously I'd heard of his passing. And, I don't always think about this sort of stuff with John McCain specifically. Um, but yeah, they might implement poisons to the maximum effect to increase, um, their ability to torture somebody. And that is far more terrifying than having limbs broken, and that's pretty bad. I mean, I'd heard stories of, they'd have people in cages and they'd, throw a crate of rats right in front of them, and the crate would break and all the rats would be angry, and, I heard about that. Obviously, heard about the bamboo torture under the fingernails and things like that. That's pretty bad too. That hurts a lot. I mean, that's a very, very sensitive spot. And there's just all kinds of things they would have done, and it would have been to create a terror apparatus so that it was, if you're American, don't don't come here. And they wanted to change that, and part of it was using John McCain as a propaganda tool. Um, he actually had his the guy in charge, his torturer, say that he would vote for John McCain if he could. The thing is, that's a straight up lie. That wasn't the real guy. The real guy slinks back into the shadows, and nobody knows. Just the military industrial complex in Asia, they know, and the American government probably knows too, but it's not something they release to the public because they obviously don't want to talk about that sort of stuff. Um, as far as uh, how Vietnam's changed since then. Uh, Basically, it's been a long diatribe and uh, very uncomfortable conversations that the United States government has had with the Vietnamese in regards to normalizing the situation. But as I said, there are people there who are still bad, and they still would do all those bad things all over again. And they will slink in the shadows. And just because you don't see them around doesn't mean that they're not. So you want to go traveling there because you want to walk through the jungle, the one that Agent Orange was used, and you turn around and say, well, that didn't have anything to do with me. I'm nowhere near old enough to have been in the Vietnam War, and I don't support it. It don't matter. You got a white face. Um, so that's kind of a thing, whether you like to admit it or not. Um, And, under John McCain's circumstances, I would not hold it against him if he totally said everything that he possibly knew. It's just the human body can only take so much. And there isn't anything that anyone can do about that. And we, as Westerners, we don't have the same ideological beliefs on life and death as a lot of Asian cultures do. The kamikaze in World War II with the Japanese. Um, no Western country ever thought like that. They, would do different things by, just having idiots not know what they were doing, walking into a trap, but, that was someone else putting them there. It wasn't them voluntarily going, I am doing this for my country and blah, 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 and, it's just not the same ideological belief. And it doesn't make theirs better, it just makes them more efficient and despicable. That's what it is as far as the military ideological belief. The way they did it did work. It's just, it's not respectable. It is an embarrassing thing for the Americans. And the Vietnamese, they have China to back them up. Um, and as I've said before, with China, with who knows how large an army as far as manpower goes, when they knock on Vietnam's door, Vietnam lets them in. But to not arouse suspicion, they will only send in basically political advisors or special units into Vietnam and basically tell them this is what's going on. Because they don't want to create a scene. They don't want anyone to know that they have anything to do with the Vietnamese as far as having control over them. And I could only, I don't even want to think about the things John McCain would have said because, I mean, as I said, there are all kinds of poisons that they could have put into him. And I don't believe they had the capability at the time, but it most certainly could be a thing where they could put some poison into you, and then many years down the road, it could lead to a brain tumor. It could have just happened, that's possible, but it may not have. It might have happened because of his treatment um, at the North Vietnamese POW camp. I mean, they did say his hair went from gray to snow white, as or white as snow is what they said. And maybe you ain't really supposed to talk about this sort of stuff, especially on the internet when you don't know who's watching. But realistically, if you have any kind of a mind that actually functions properly, you'll easily understand these concepts. And there are plenty of people out there who will immediately attack your character to discredit you because most people are gullible and they only have to hear bad words about someone and they believe them. Me, I'm a lot more critical about that. I have to see it for myself, and that's where things are getting even more tricky. With audio tinkering, especially on the internet, I can make a video, and it's not like in the olden days where, there'd be like a Godzilla movie, and when the people went to, because they spoke in Japanese because it was made in Japan, you could tell that it was clearly dubbed over. But now they've gotten better at doing it. So that's definitely something to be, you know, concerned about. And not only that, but there's the whole Star Wars where they're able to superimpose someone's face onto another body, and the other body does things like all kinds of horrible things. Like you're like you don't even want to know. Embarrassing stuff. And there was a reason John McCain, got as far as he did in the American political system. He was never going to be president. I knew that the moment I saw him running for it. I knew Obama was going to win. And there were some things I probably would have agreed with John McCain on, and other things I would not have agreed with him on. I know in his final years, he really did not like Donald Trump. He didn't like him at all. Um, it might be uh, a quote that George Bush actually had said, which was the rewarding of bad behavior. And that's a serious thing. Like, it seems as though although plenty of bad things happened to the Vietnamese people, essentially, the business model that they've created for Vietnam, it did benefit, people who did bad things, and that's the rewarding of bad behavior. And you know, it, everybody should, have a clean slate. Um, but there are many people in positions of power who do not look at it like that. They look at it as he's a white guy, he's a Vietnamese guy, he's a whatever. We're going to treat him like this because of that. That's a fact about life. It's just what it is. Um, like if some, 5-year-old Vietnamese immigrant came here, I'd have nothing against them, so long as they were well indoctrinated into the Canadian system, of course, integrated into our way of life. Absolutely no problems after that. And it's not really too difficult to convince some people of things, really. I mean, unfortunately, there are people who even go so far as to have such rage and hate that it supersedes that, and that is really, really wrong. And there are more people in Vietnam than there are proportionately in the United States that feel that way. And that's because the economic war and the fact the war didn't actually end. I don't care what it says on a bunch of papers. I don't care what it says in Vietnam documentaries. The war didn't end. With the economic movement that came afterwards, the economic war, Vietnam is still a third world country. And that is due to American politics in regards to the region. We are still enemies. They don't come out and say that very often or ever. And they're very careful about how they make Vietnam movies, especially as they're still trying to push the normalization of traveling to these places and also, them building up their economy and things like that. Uh, if the Americans wanted to do that, They could have made Vietnam like South Korea, wealthy for the most part. Not everywhere in South Korea is wealthy, but as a whole, South Korea is quite a wealthy country. Um, and with the eventual reunification, because that's what it looks like what Kim Jong Un wants to do, because it's in his best interest. It's not going to happen overnight. Probably happen over a couple hundred years, but I guess he'll be working on the stepping stones for that, and he'll want to move forward because just grinding yourself into the ground isn't going to get you anywhere. And I think even Kim Jong Il knew that. It was suspected that he was just trying to barter away his nuclear program. Uh, and then George Bush said, "We don't trust him." Blah blah blah. Um, but when the North Koreans reunify with the South, essentially it's going to be a South Korean government. That's the fact of the matter. There will be there are a lot of military leaders in North Korea who are constantly, they hate each other just as much as they hate the South Koreans. They hate everybody. They're angry. And Kim Jong Un is the face of North Korea, and he has his sycophantic generals that are always hovering over him whenever he's having pictures taken. Um However, there are other generals who, don't agree with Kim Jong Un's policies and things like that, and that's why common ground is so hard to do. Like, it's well known that Putin and Trump actually like each other. But that doesn't mean all of Russia is willing to forgive the United States for what they consider as wrongdoing. That's just not going to happen that easily. It's work in progress, and then probably in a few hundred years, it'll be fine. Um, so there's that issue. There's just issues all over the world. And like there is a clip on YouTube of the old POW camp that's been transferred into a museum. That would be a place of absolute horrors. Um, it was also said that John McCain also visited Vietnam, I believe during his election campaign. Um, and I think it was safe enough for him to do that based on political factors like the Vietnamese would have had a giant laugh if McCain had won the election. And John McCain wanted to win. He wanted to be president. I just, I knew it wasn't going to happen, but it would have been a huge victory for Asia had he become president because it was a bad time for the United States. A lot of people don't know this, but it was a bad time for the United States during the Obama era. You see it in a lot of, especially pop culture. They all went crazy. Uh, like Lady Gaga, for example, and things like that. Heath Ledger, he something happened to him. I had my theories about this, and most of the pop stars went crazy, and the ones that got big were like Bruce Jenner, got his dick cut off. Um, I don't know what racial background the Kardashians are, but they were very big and they had nothing to say, nothing of any interest anyway. And that's because, there were people going, all right, well, you get to be in power, but that doesn't mean you get to say anything good. And, it was a lousy time. It was an embarrassing time for the United States because President Obama didn't always have America's best interests in mind. In fact, a lot of the times he didn't. And as he was making his speeches and the things he tried to do, there's aspects, more complexities of what he tried to do that people don't know about and wouldn't understand if they heard it. And basically, Brad Pitt put it the easiest way. He said, the United States is a business, referring to the fact that, if business is elsewhere, the moneymakers will leave the United States. Now, that isn't going to happen because Donald Trump's president and he's saying, let's make America great again. And then you get all kinds of cunts coming out of the woodwork going, "Oh, America was never great, blah, 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 blah." Well, you tell me where was a fucking better place. You don't know one. Like, seriously. Like, get your fucking head out of a fucking sling. Um, yeah, so, John McCain, he went through a horrible time. And it just would have been the most giant slap in the face for the American government and country for John McCain uh, to have become president. He did everything to the best of his abilities, but because of circumstances, like being in a POW camp, for example, um, and also he probably had a camaraderie with a lot of people in the camp uh, who still live to this day, and he had to make obligations in order to not see his friends suffer, or at least any more than they had to. Um, and this is how you create commitment. Well, how governments in military times create commitment is essentially it's just downright dirty threats. That's all it is. And it's a low down, dirty way of doing things, but that's just the way it is. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for John McCain. There are some things I don't like about him. There's some things I understand about him, and there probably were a lot of things I did like about him. I'm not exactly sure because they don't tell us that much about, politics and that sort of stuff. Um, you can do everything in your position that is to the best of your abilities and it's right based on your circumstances, but you can still be wrong. And John McCain, was was there. That's why he didn't win the presidency. The Americans figured, well, this is a bad time for us because it was, just probably bad economics. We were compromised with Chinese mainland and their advancement of submarines, and there was just other things that were coming out of the woodwork that were troublesome for us. And we had to pick a president who was secretly embarrassing to the country. And a lot of people look at Donald Trump and go, "Oh, he's an embarrassment. Look at him. He's always cracking jokes. He looks like he's got an orange tan. He's got small hands." Blah, blah, blah. And then you get the idiots who all, slurp that up and go, "Oh, this is great. Yeah, what an idiot." And they don't realize that they're the fucking idiot. Whereas Obama comes in a suit, speaks eloquently, has a great demeanor, and everyone's like, revote Obama and oh, we're mad that Hillary Clinton didn't win, who essentially would have been a lackey for Obama because Obama didn't want to, lose power. Obama would have been behind the scenes. He is still behind the scenes, but he doesn't have the kind of power that he wanted to have because he wanted Hillary Clinton to win. It's the same thing as uh, like if the Tories were to get in next year and kick Justin Trudeau out, it would be Stephen Harper controlling Andrew Scheer like a puppet master. So that's part of the reason why a lot of people still don't like the Tories. But keeping in mind, inflation's going up a lot faster under the Justin Trudeau government. So you take that into consideration. Not saying it wouldn't have happened under the Conservatives, but we don't know at this point. But it is happening under the Justin Trudeau era. Anyway, getting back to John McCain. Um, yeah. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. Um, and it was really sad that what happened. Um, and he did everything to the best of his abilities. I believe that wholeheartedly. And I'm just going to say rest in peace. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good night.